welcome to the Daily Report. They always say third time's the charm, but not in this situation. Tonight, we're talking all matters energy. We have the principal secretary for that particular state department. We're going to be telling you what exactly happened that made the national blackout. But before then, let's have the highlights.
Tonight, the government blows hot and cold on the true state of the country's economy.
I think this issue of salary may have been misunderstood. Can I confirm to you that all salaries for the November month have been paid?
With one side claiming the economy is fine, while the other denies the claims. Also tonight, cabinet secretaries ranked from the highest to the least performing in a report released by research firm TIFA.
And at the bottom, we have CS Wahome, in Water and Sanitation, Jeru, National Treasury, Professor Ndungu, Gender, Jumwa, and Energy, Cheer.
And police in Nakuru detained their colleague who shot and killed a person after arguing over a bill at an entertainment venue.
We have since arrested the officer. He's in police custody at the Kaptembwa police station, and he will be arraigned in court as soon as possible.
Right, thank you once again for joining us. My name is Hibak Said. Our sign language interpreter for the night is Catherine Simaloi. To start us off, 3 women were brutally murdered in their home in Matadhya village, Thika East. The 3, an 87-year-old woman, identified as Penina Wairimu Ngugi, her daughter, 50-year-old Pauline Jerry, and a close relative are suspected to have been killed on Friday night by unknown attackers. Zainab Mohammed with the details.
After missing for 3 days, villagers and neighbors went looking for the 3 only to discover 2 badly mutilated bodies in the house and a third beheaded one buried in a shallow grave in the house's backyard.
Tukateki jukumu ya kujaribu kutafuta watu wao, na watu wao wakati wamekuja immediately tukaenda pale kwa polisi na tukaripoti. Kuripoti kwa polisi, tukakuja na polisi na tukajaribu kuvuja mlango, tukaingia ndani na tukawakuta already wawili walikuwa wamekufa huko ndani na mmoja amekufa na akapelekwa na huko kwa mandizi kwa shamba.
Police also found 2 knives suspected to have been used to stab the 3 outside the house.
Tumepata visu viwili hapo na tunaamini ya kwamba kwa sababu mwili imefura hatuwezi dhibitisha kwa sahihi, lakini itafanywa uchunguzi ijulikane ni kitu gani kimeweza kutendeka.
The family that is said to have moved into the area about 3 years ago is said to have recently disposed of property in Ruiru, raising suspicion that could be the cause of the attack. Thika East Police Commander Andrew Sora says police are pursuing crucial leads to arrest one of the suspects believed to have been behind the heinous act. The bodies of the 3 were taken to Thika General Cargo Mortuary. Zainab Mohammed, T47.
Thank you, Zainab Mohammed, for that report. Now, President William Ruto has maintained his stance to implement the housing levy, despite a High Court judgment that declared it unconstitutional. The president noting that the implementation is necessary for Kenya to catch up with other nations. Sheila Chelangat reports.
While speaking at the 2nd annual Kenya Diaspora Investment Conference, President William Ruto vowed to ensure the successful implementation of the housing project.
1,410 slums in Kenya. It's not just Kibera. You know, whenever we talk about slums, people think it is Mukuru and Kibera and a few places. 1,410 countrywide. So we need to liberate our people from the indignity of living in slums.
The president says that through the affordable housing project, Kenya will be able to catch up with developing nations.
It look like owning a house is the privilege of the people who have means. We must make it owning a house is a right for every citizen who lives in our country.
Further, he says that the implementation is the bone of contention, noting that the project was a good plan, with it having featured in the manifestos of both Azimio and Kenya Kwanza during the 2022 elections.
So this beautiful project was in the manifesto of Kenya Kwanza. The same housing project, complete with percentages of the levy, was also in the Azimio manifesto. But when it came to implementation, my friends, that is where the devil lives. Nobody wanted it implemented. Because we all want to talk about it. It is good. You know, we go tell the people, we are going to do this, we are going to do this, when hardly people mean it.
The High Court, however, stopped collection of the housing levy, terming the levy discriminatory on employed Kenyans while excluding those in the informal sector. Sheila Chelangat for TV 47.
Thank you, Sheila Chilangat. The National Treasury has changed tune on the economy's status tonight, saying there is no cash crunch crisis in the government. National Treasury Cabinet Secretary Professor Njuguna Ndung'u now says he was taken out of context, while his PS, Chris Kipto, said the government has already paid out November and December salaries, asserting there is no cash crunch. But as Apollo Kamau reports, economic experts remain skeptical on the change of tune coming a day after the president said the economy is back on track.
A day after bullish President William Ruto told the nation the economy is back on track, having recovered from the danger of debt distress, the National Treasury, in a curious turn of events, has denied a cash crunch crisis existed in the first place, with Cabinet Secretary Professor Njuguna Ndung'u saying he was taken out of context. His Principal Secretary, Chris Kipto, has also allayed fears of a liquidity crisis, saying the government has paid November salaries.
This issue of salary may have been misunderstood. Can I confirm to you that all salaries for the November month have been paid fully? I want everybody to know all salaries for the month of November have been fully settled. And we are on course towards settling for December as scheduled. So there should be no cause for alarm.
Most of the time I also see the papers, they analyze things nicely. They provide the right data, but they analyze things the wrong way.
Just last week, CS Dongo lamented before MPs how the government is paying salaries with arrears to avoid defaulting on loans, which are falling due, especially the 3 or 5 billion shillings hero bond, which is due in June next year.
I can tell you, we are even having trouble with salaries. We are clearing salaries with arrears. Okay? You know, just imagine that. The first thing we can do, and you are familiar with this story, is that we cannot default on external debt because our credibility is going to be ruined. It takes the first charge.
Order, Honorable Senator.
So, what has changed in a span of 6 days after last week's walkout by senators over unpaid salaries for their staff for the past 2 months, and members of the National Assembly who stormed out of the chambers over NGCDF? Did the president's assertive speech on the economy force the National Treasury to change tune?
The president is the beacon of hope in the country, and he cannot come to on the national TV and tell people that the economy is not working. Because if he does that, then he's telling us to sack him. And therefore, he has to come in on the national TV and tell us how things are working. But I think the question that we need to ask ourselves is, me and you as a common mwananchi, are we feeling the words of the president in our pockets, in our houses, and also in whatever we are doing in our businesses? And I think the answer is no.
Still, early last week, the Commission on Revenue Allocation, CRA, while appearing before the Budget Committee, warned that revenues, especially from taxes, are likely to continue dropping. The National Treasury and the President in his Jamhuri Day speech did not say how much out of the external and internal debts the government has paid, including the commitment by the President to pay off the first installment of the Eurobond, amounting to 45.8 billion shillings this December. Kenya's public debt portfolio is currently at 10.2 trillion shillings.
we have a problem, an economic problem in the country. And one of the challenges that we have is debt that has to be paid. And I think every coin that the government is making is going to the debt.
Economic experts and the opposition have faulted the government for its loan dalliance with the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. The two Bretton Woods institutions are largely behind the new taxes in the Finance Act. Apul Kamau, TV47.
The push and pull continues. On the same note, despite President William Ruto's assurance to Kenyans that the country's economy, which has been burdened by a substantial public debt, is stable, citizens are still facing challenges with a high cost of essential goods. According to a recent poll, 87% of them have been forced to cut back on their personal spending in response to these economic times. Now, according to Kenyans who spoke to TV47, President William Ruto's administration has more to do regarding the cost of living in its target to please the common mwananchi. Micah Gongo reports.
Speaking to Kenyans at the 60th Jamhuri Day celebrations in Nairobi's Uhuru Gardens Tuesday, the head of state credited the country's economy recovery to difficult sacrifices made by both Kenyans and his administration, including spending reductions. This to Kenyans has not been felt following a continuous increase of taxes and levies imposed on them.
Consultancy fee of 10,000 shillings.
A substantial 87% of Kenyans, according to recent TIFA research poll, for instance, have been forced to cut back on their personal spending as a result of the financial pressures.
Na tena ukiangalia hawa wanatununulianga hawana pesa. Kwa hivyo hata hawakuji kwa soko, wamekatalia manyumbani. Hata ukienda kuwatembelea hakuna kitu yani hakuna kitu ya kukula.
Wanasema hakuna pesa. Vitu yote tunauza bei kali na watu makikuja makasema ni bei kali.
His Excellency. When he assumed office last year, the president stated that in order to save the nation from an economic meltdown, his administration had to postpone implementing vital development initiatives. Kenyans are expressing worry over President William Ruto's criticism of the previous government's excessive borrowing during the campaign leading up to the general elections. And in a sharp contrast, since assuming power, he has applied for loans from the World Bank, the IMF and other organizations.
Lazima kama rais ucreate jobs katika inji. Si utuambie unataka kutusafirisha, utupeleke huko kama ng'ambo, Saudi Arabia.
Bei ya chakula imeshuka kidogo sana, aswaunga inaweza kuwa imeshuka, lakini bado kuna mambo mengi ya kufanya.
The steep rise in the cost of living and the faltering economy present a formidable challenge for the Kenya Kwanza administration. Kenyans have been forced to make larger financial sacrifices, especially for the necessities like fuel.
Kuna kitu yenye inafanyika kwa economy yenye inaajiri vijana. Serikali ile mradi ya nyumba yenye serikali ilikuwa ilete ilishapigwa na kotini. So hakuna kazi kwa vijana. Kulikuwa na ile kazi kwa vijana mtaani pia ilianguka.
Sasa mbona rais hajasema ukweli kutuambia uchumi inaenda vibaya? Na pia tuambie kuwa alitudanganya na mambo ya bottom up, kwa sababu kama ulidanganya lazima utoe uongo na ulete ukweli.
Mike Kagwango, TV47, Nairobi.
And as we ruminate on those particular stories, we go for a very short break. When we come back, more news. Do stay tuned.
Time out for break.
welcome back. Please do remember to engage with us on our socials at TV47 News on X, formerly known as Twitter, at TV47KE on Facebook. Now, Cabinet Secretary for Interior and National Administration, Professor Kithure Kindiki, has been ranked the best performing CS, while Energy and Petroleum CS, Davis Chirchir, has been ranked the least performing Cabinet Secretary. This is according to the latest poll by TIFA, which also revealed that President Ruto is performing badly on reducing debt, corruption, job creation, and the cost of living. George Maringa breaks down the numbers for us.
The Kenya Kwanza government remains on the radar of the binoculars of Kenyans and on the weighing scale as well, if the latest poll results are anything to go by. Professor of Law Interior CS Kithure Kindiki retained his best ranking position as Kenyans believe he's steering the Interior and National Administration docket well. Prime CS and Ministry of Foreign Affairs CS Musalia Mudavadi and Ezekiel Mashogu of Education coming in second and third at 62% and 58% respectively. On the flip side, Davis Chirchir of Energy and Petroleum docket comes in last with a performance rating of 19%. Aisha Jumwa of Gender scored 23%, while Treasury's Professor Njuguna Ndung'u, Zakaria Njero of Water and Sanitation, and Alice Wahome of Lands tied at 24%.
I am not in a position to say, TIFA is not in a position to say, when we have these national power blackouts, is that really in any way the fault or the mistake of Bwana Chirchir? There are a lot of people below him who are dealing with power. So I don't know where the blame lies. But, you know, the responsibility starts with the person the president appoints to sit on top of that ministry.
The CS rating attributes used to compute overall scores are 6. First is awareness, that is known by Kenyans. Secondly, trust that the CS will deliver on their mandate. Third, visibility, communicates what their ministry is doing. Fourth, commitment, that the CS is committed to addressing issues facing Kenyans. Fifth, issues resolution, that the CS is actively strengthening issues in the ministry. And lastly, transparent, that the CS is honest and open about issues facing the ministry. The 46-page report also disclosed that Interior CS Kithure Kindiki has toured 41 counties with zero number of foreign trips on social media pages, while Musalia Mudavadi has toured 23 counties and had 16 foreign trips. President William Ruto is doing well in protecting forests, supporting agriculture, combating pollution and contamination, as well as encouraging tourists and investment in tourism. Kenyans, however, rank him poorly in reducing the debt/donor financial dependence, reducing corruption, creating jobs, and reducing the cost of living. The release reports results from a CATI, that is mobile phone survey, conducted between 25th November and 7th December. It engaged 3,009 respondents who constitute a representative sample of Kenya's adult population, that is those above 17 years of age.
From the Nakuru Central Police Station allegedly opened fire after refusing to pay a bill of 16,000 Kenyan shillings at a local joint. Chichi Josephine tells us more.
Police in Nakuru are holding a fellow police officer accused of shooting a barmaid at a club in Nakuru and killing her on the spot.
We are told that the officer was supposed to pay a bill of 13,000. So conflicting stories is that the officer had already paid cash of 13,000 shillings, and then the waiter wanted him to pay again. In that situation, an argument ensued, and that is I think what prompted the officer to use his gun.
During the incident, Constable Nicholas Musau is alleged to have engaged in an argument with a barmaid in the club over a bill she had given him in a popular club in Nakuru before he reached out for his pistol and opened fire.
Alikuja akaniambia hii kuna customer anasumbua, anafanya 22 unisaidie, ndio amekata kutoka 20 unisaidie tumtoe. So tukaenda tukamwongelesha, ndio alikuwa amelewa. Akatoa bunduki, akaikok na akanipiga kwa tumbo. Ya kwanza pap, ya pili akanipiga ingine kwa side. So hata nashanga, yani ilikuwa tu Mungu, sijui hata nimesurvive sahi. akaanza kupiga. So mimi hapo nikachanganikiwa, nikaenda nikaanguka huko mbele, akaanza kupiga, kapiga. Hizo ndo part mimi naweza kumbuka.
Confirming the incident, Nakuru County Police Commander Samuel Ndanyi said the officer was arrested and locked up at Kaptembo Police Station. A Jericho pistol with 2 rounds of 9mm ammunition was recovered from the suspect.
Na watu wa ine walikuwa wamepigwa risasi. One waiter by the name Ann was immediately rushed to the hospital and pronounced dead on arrival. We have since arrested the officer. He's in police custody at Kaptembo Police Station and will be arraigned in court as soon as possible.
The 3 victims, comprising of 2 men and a woman, are nursing serious gunshot injuries at Nakuru Level 5 Hospital and are in a stable condition, according to the county boss.
3 were injured and 2 are in fair condition, stable condition. 1 is in critical condition. We have been informed that the one by the name Laura is the owner of the bar.
Chichi, Josephine, TV 47.
Let's switch over to the world of business. The market took a positive momentum this week with the benchmark indices closing the week in the green, with the Monetary Policy Committee increasing the central bank rate. The expectation is thus expected to ensure that inflationary expectations remain anchored while setting inflation on a firm downward path, as Natasha Wairimu now reports.
A very good evening and welcome to this week's market summary with me, Natasha Wairimu. Now, the Central Bank of Kenya Monetary Policy Committee made the decision to raise the central bank rate by 200 basis points, bringing it to 12.50% from 10.50%, reason being to address the pressures on the exchange rate and to mitigate second-round effects. Now, second-round effects refer to the indirect impact that changes in the exchange rate can have on other aspects of the economy, such as prices and inflation. And in as much as the Monetary Policy Committee was comfortable with inflation playing at 7.5%, the actual target, get this, is 5%. But what does this move actually mean?
So by raising the benchmark rate by 200 basis points, the central bank aims to attract dollar inflows back into our balance of payments account, and in this way stemming the volatility on the Kenya shilling. Going forward, there's really minimal headroom for the central bank to keep up pacing rates before we start to see economic growth start to dwindle. And this, of course, comes because the higher the rate of borrowing, the lower will be the investment activity in the economy. And consequently, unemployment numbers begin to swell and output growth begins to decline.
Market was leaning towards an upward trend driven by bullish sentiments across select blue chips in the telco, construction, and banking sectors. The benchmark indices closed the week in the green. The Nairobi Securities Exchange All-Share Index gained 1.8% week over week, with the Nairobi Securities Exchange 20 and 25 share indices gaining 0.2% week over week. The Nairobi Securities Exchange 10 share index remained largely unchanged from the prior week's levels. Safaricom was the week's top traded counter, accounting for 79.7% of the week's activity. The telco gained 3.6% week over week to 14.55 Kenya shillings. Banking stocks dominated the week's top mover chart, with Stanbic being the best performing top mover on a 6.1% week over week rally to 108.25 Kenya shillings. Bamburi continued its winning streak, closing the week as the top gainer on an 18.0% week over week rally to 41.35 Kenya shillings. Everready East Africa shed 14.5% to 1.12 Kenya shillings to top the losers chart. That is all we had this week on stocks and markets. Be sure to tune in next week for more. My name is Natasha Wairimu.
TV47 Sports, brought to you by Kulik Prize and Radio 47. Make your festive gaming experience memorable. Tune in, play, and stand a chance to unwrap delightful surprises all December long with Radio 47 and Kulik Prize.
This is TV47 Sports News. Remember, you now have a chance to win amazing prizes like an all-expense-paid trip to Mombasa Beach Hotel, Mbuzi, airtime, cooking oil, bus fare, and other prizes with Radio 47 and ClickBet. To participate, send the word Flight 47 to 24550. Right, let's get on to sports news. Maybet's company has begun their Maybet's Mashinani initiative, which aims at distributing football jerseys and balls to grassroots, football clubs. Today, Maybet's group distributed football jerseys to Mwihoko Sportive and Juja-based Dreamers FC with an aim to supporting clubs. Felix.
So first of all, I'd like to thank the Maybet group. As you can see, Dreamers tulianza tukiwa very low. We started with a single ball. Now this ball has been able to keep us going, and through the support of the neighbors of this area, tumejaribu kupush hapa na pale. As you can see, we have little funds, and at the same time tunajaribu kumap a route for these young fellas, because as you know, football inatusaidia, we stay out of a lot of trouble, unaona. So we are really grateful to the Maybet company. Thank you very much na Mungu awabariki.
Tuko hapa tumekuja kuonesha Dreamers, kuwapatia mipira, kuwapatia jazi. Si mmefurahi? Hivyo ndio tunataka tukienda kupelekea watu wengine, vijana wengine.
Nawaambia tunafurahi leo sana kupokea wageni, wamekuja kututembelea, pia wamekuja na bidhaa mzuri. Ni mwenyeji, mgeni njoo mwenyeji apone. Wametusaidia sana. Kuna mpira, unajua wakati hizo mpira za grassroots unapata mara mingi kuna challenges mingi sana. Of course hakuna udhamini, mara mingi equipments hakuna mahali watu wanaweza cheza mpira, but tukiona vitu kama hizi zinaanza kufanyika maybe kwa lower division, then it's a good thing.
So far tunafurahi. Opportunity kama hizi hazikujangi kila mara. Maana wanasemanga opportunity comes once in a lifetime. Na tukipata opportunity kama hii inatupatia motisha, inatupatia encouragement. Angalau kuna watu wanatuangalia, kuna watu wanasupport mpira, na kwa hivyo tunapiga shukrani sana.
Kuja tunawasaidia, tunapea jazi, tuna make sure wana jazi. Tunataka yani kumotivate teams nyingi sana. Hata sasa hivi kutoka hapa tuna mali pengine tunaenda kupea na jazi pia. So tunataka yani tuwasaidie, wanaweza tucontact kwa social media. Tutaongea na sisi, tutawapatia representative moja ambao atakuja kuangalia na tutaweza kuwasaidia.
Quite encouraging. Mike Kisia from Vet Lab Sports Club emerged as the winner of the second leg of Safari Tour Season 6, held at Vet Lab Sports Club. The tournament, which attracted 50 players from Tanzania, Uganda, Zimbabwe, Malawi, and the host Kenya, and witnessed Kisia's exceptional performance, securing his victory with an impressive gross score of 292. Now, his outstanding efforts earned him the coveted first-place position, accompanied by a well-deserved prize of 150,000 Kenyan shillings. Dismas Indiza from Mumias Golf Club and Samuel Njoroge from Railway Golf Club tied second, each concluding the tournament with a total score of 295. Right, African Rally Championship winner Karan Patel is the Sports Association of Kenya Sports Personality of November. The Nairobi-based driver won the Africa Rally Championship title in Tanzania last month, making him the favorite to win the award as he toppled Michael Karanga of Kiambu Golf Club and 58-year-old athlete Priscilla Biwott, who won the 5,000-meter race at the 14th Africa Masters Athletics Championships in Pretoria, South Africa. Now, this is the second time Patel has won the award after doing so in October 2022. Now that concludes our sports news for tonight. However, the interview segment is coming over later on after a very short break, and you will get to know what exactly happened that caused the blackouts not only in the capital but across the country. We already have the principal secretary for the ministry, or rather for the State Department of Energy, later on. We will be giving you that and much more later on, but we go for a very short break. When we come back, it's the marketplace.
Maybets, base ya washindi. Kwa browser
Welcome back to the Daily Report and welcome to the Marketplace. Tonight we talk all matters energy with the Principal Secretary for the State Department of Energy, that is Alex Wachira, who, by the way, just yesterday was given the Chief of the Order of the Burning Spear. How does it feel? Congratulations, by the way.
Yeah, thank you, and you're most welcome.
Right.
Thank you even for having me here. And you did ask how it feels. Of course, it feels good when the president recognizes your efforts that you have done throughout the year, because we are exactly 1 year in office.
Right.
And there is a much that we have done, even though what we have done is being undone by the 3 blackouts that we have had.
Right.
But there is much that we have done, and this interview, I'll be able to shed more light on what we have done.
Right.
So it feels good to be recognized, but it's the 3rd highest medal that one can get.
Right.
The highest is the CGH, reserved for His Excellency the President.
Right.
Then, of course, we have the EGH. Then now the CBS comes in, so at least
must feel nice.
It feels nice.
And I'm glad you said shedding light, which is, you know, quite the topic tonight. A lot of people are curious what exactly happened in those hours that there was a blackout, of course. And one must wonder, and this I think is the best way to start this conversation. The Cabinet Secretary on Monday had said that the main issue that was being experienced that caused the latest blackout was the fact that a lot of transmission network implements or transmission network infrastructure was not working the way it was supposed to work. There was the matter of aging. He did say 2017 was the last time they were serviced. One must wonder, what happened? Where did we forget about this infrastructure?
It's not an issue of forgetting.
Right.
We are a growing nation with a lot of needs. And one main challenge that we're having in this country is that we have 2 areas of generation of power. Mainly the Eastern Hydros, composed of Masinga, Kamburu, Kiambere, Gitaru, and Kindaruma. And we have the geothermals in all Karia. And now we have about 35 megawatts in Sosian, that is Menengai. And so therefore, when you generate power, unlike cellular network, for example, our mobile phones, you need conductors to conduct that power from its generation source to its load centers. We have 3 main load centers in this country. The first load center is in Nairobi, consumes about 49% of our power needs. The second load center is in Coast, and the 3rd load center is in Western Kenya. Now, so you have to generate power in the Eastern Hydros, push it through transmission lines to Nairobi. Then if you are generating at all Karia, you push it back to Nairobi and you push it back to Western Kenya. Now, the circuit to Western Kenya has a small constraint between Kisumu to Muhoroni and Muhoroni to Chemosit. Because from Chemosit, you have a transmission line that has been newly done by Ketraco that moves to Sotik, and you get a tee-off. One moves to Kegati and Awendo, the other one goes to Bomet. Now, power moves from all Karia, goes to Lesos. Lesos is somewhere in Kapsabet, that is in Nandi. Crosses to another substation called Kibos in Kisumu. Kibos, you move to Mamboleo. Mamboleo, you move now to Muhoroni. Muhoroni to Chemosit. Chemosit to Sotik. Sotik to Bomet. Sotik to Kegati. So in the process of that long route, one, you lose a lot of voltage. And 2, because the size of the line between Muhoroni, Kisumu and Muhoroni, and between Muhoroni and Chemosit can only carry a capacity of about 80 to 100 megawatts. At the point where it gave in, it was carrying 149 megawatts, almost double the capacity. So you can imagine you have a tank that is full of water, 10,000 liters of tank of water, and you want to push that water out within, say, 2 or 3 minutes, and you're using a 1 or 2 inch pipe.
Right.
One will have to give in. Either the tank will burst, or you will not be able to deliver the water that you want to deliver. Right. Or in case you do and you're exerting a lot of pressure, the pipe will burst. Right. So the section between Muhoroni, Kisumu and Muhoroni had an over voltage, right. And so therefore it tripped. Now, power is a very interesting thing. The moment a system trips, one section strips, then you have to, power tries to look for the next alternative route, because the demand is still in place. Right. So what happened is that the alternative route for power to flow now back to Kisumu Muhoroni, right. Is now more power to move from Olkaria to Dandora. Right. Then Dandora used the old Kenya-Uganda line, right. Back to Lesos, back to Kisumu, right. Back to Muhoroni. So then the overvoltage you see, we have had the first line trip. Right. Now the load now that is being pushed between Suswa, Olkaria Suswa to Nairobi North, the line again tripped, because we are telling that line again, over and above the power that you are pushing, we need to take up these other additional loads, right. That you will take to Kisumu. So the system tripped in, right. In the Nairobi North line. Right. After the Nairobi North line, every other system tripped. Right. And that is why the only section that remained with a little bit of power, right. Is the off-grid stations. And number two, around Musaga, Kakamega, those areas, right. Because of the Uganda transmission line. So basically that is what happened in a nutshell, that one event led to the other, and we eventually lost the grid. But we did not stop there. We immediately restarted the system through backfeeding, right. And by around 11:59, we had majorly done well in terms of getting the system back to the grid. And right. Yeah.
Bwana PS, as our viewers can see some of the facts that we have on this particular sector, just to have context of what exactly is happening. Of course, electricity prices have risen by around 70%. We will be touching on that soon enough. But first, you have talked about, some of the solutions that you put in place. Of course, there are short-term mitigation measures and there are long-term mitigation measures. Just today, the cabinet has ordered the unbundling of electricity transmission systems to contain blackouts. That means that in whatever section, a transmission network where there is a fault or a trip, there won't be blackouts that, is going to span across the country, which is one of the short-term measures. But another short-term measures is the possibility of, power rationing, right? Are we going the South Africa way?
There are several measures that we are taking in place, right, to mitigate this issue.
Right.
Number one, to sort out the issue, the low voltage in Western Kenya, there is a missing link. We have done a line between Olkaria to Narok. And remember, I gave you the other route that has done a line to Bomet. So there is a missing link of about 81 kilometers.
Right.
That is, we call Narok Bomet. Right. We are going to do a 132 kV 81 kilometers double circuit. This is a line that in the least cost power development plan was supposed to be done by 2013, but it was not done. And that is why we are seeing these issues that are happening. You can imagine 10 years ago is when we were supposed to have that line. So that you push now power from Olkaria direct from to Narok, direct to Bomet, to Sotik, Kegati, and you push power down South Nyanza and South Rift. Right. So that is a first mitigation measure that we are going to do to remove the concern that I elaborated about.
Right.
Now, again, the area around Kabarnet, that is North Rift.
Right.
We have serious voltage instability. So what are we doing? We are almost completing a line from Lesos to Kabarnet.
Right.
Now, again, the area around Rumuruti, that is Maralal, all those regions, Nyahururu, the line that serves Rumuruti comes all the way from Lanet. It's a 33 kV line, right, with a lot of intersections. Right. So that line now is overstretched, and so therefore you have been having frequent blackouts around the Rumuruti area. Right. So the first, we are going to complete a line we call Nanyuki to Rumuruti. Then in the CAB memo that has just approved the funding for Narok-Bomet has 3 other lines.
Right.
Other than Narok-Bomet, we have Kabarnet-Rumuruti. Then we do have another one that we call Marindi, Weru, Kilifi. Why? Because also coast is having the same issues of voltage instability. Why? Because power, you are pushing power from the eastern hydros or from Olkaria all the way to coasts.
Right.
And that is why we are saying in the near future, we want to diversify our generation so that each load center can have its own generation plant.
Right.
For example, in coasts, we want to put up a nuclear power plant in Kilifi and another one in Kwale. That means that other than the solar plant that is in Malindi, the Globelec solar plant, we need to have 2 other generation sources. And the other generation source that serves the coast and for voltage stability is Rabai Power and Kipevu 3, because we have since retired 2 thermal generators in the coast region.
Right.
So basically, each and every area of this country has a I've enumerated the area around Rumuruti, that is around Rumuruti, then North Rift around Kabarnet, and South Rift and South Nyanza. So those areas, and we have the master plan, and we are sure within the next couple of months, for example, Desos Kabarnet will complete within the next couple of months. Nanyuki Rumuruti by November 6th will have completed, and we'll have also completed a section that we call Isiolo to Nanyuki to complete the Mount Kenya loop of 132 network. So there is a lot that we are doing.
Right.
Now, you did mention about the cost of power, and I need to tell Kenyans.
And before we go to the cost of power, right? You have mentioned, and I'll maybe take you back a little bit. You have mentioned alternative power transmission lines and transmission networks, which will take roughly around 20 months, as the Cabinet Secretary had said. And as short-term solutions, load shedding was suggested, and the Cabinet Secretary did say that by tomorrow there might be a tentative schedule to that effect. Maybe if we could just have a bit of an insight on that.
We are not talking of load shedding per se or power rationing per se.
Right.
Remember, I did say that the area that we are having serious issues of delivering the power that the area needs is South Rift and South Nyanza. Those are the areas that we are having serious constraint. The demand is about 120 megawatts during peak.
Right.
During the day, everything is okay. But from 6:30, when people are back home, they are lighting up their lights, the TVs are on, and the factories are running, power demand suddenly surges up. So that is the time that we are having this constraint. And the area affected is basically South Nyanza, South Rift. And what we are trying to do is trying to get mitigation measures. Right. There is a line that we call Sondu Awendo Homabe that we are sure we can be able to complete by April next year. That is going to help us deload this Kisumu-Muhoroni route. And so therefore the intensity of because we are talking about between 20 and 40 megawatts, not a lot of power. And not that we don't have power. We have the power. The only thing we don't have is a system to deliver that power to the load center. Right. So my minister was taken out of context. Right. That he was seen to have said that we are going to go to full-blown power rationing. That's not the case. Right. We have adequate power in the grid, more so when we do have improved hydrology, improved in the hydros. We're able to push as much hydropower as possible, and we push geothermal as possible. So at the moment we do have what this country is lacking, and I need to speak to the nation. Right. What we are lacking is, one, the transmission network around those areas that I've mentioned, and two, what we call the spinning reserve. What the spinning reserve does for a country is, for example, if for one reason or the other, one geothermal plant is out, and it removes about 140 megawatts off the grid, you need to have an alternative source that will cater for this different. Right. So what is now diminishing, because we have not brought on board, because of the moratorium that was there earlier, we have not brought on board more power is we are diminishing the spinning reserve.
Right.
But what are we doing about it? We are in consultation with Parliament, and we believe that Parliament very soon will lift the moratorium. And so therefore we should be able to give PPAs to more power producers. Like today, Cabinet did approve the construction by Kengen of Kamburu solar plant, 42.5 megawatts.
But Bwana Pius, you have said that production isn't the issue. Transmission networks
Transmission is
are the issue.
Yes.
So lifting of the moratorium for PPAs,
yes.
Just give us context here. How will that help reducing the blackouts?
That is now post 2026-27.
Right.
Because power plants, just like transmission lines, take a while to build.
Right.
And so therefore, what we are saying is with the lifting of the moratorium, it will allow us now to plan for more power generation that will come into the grid by from 2026, 27, 28, 29 onwards.
Right.
And I was saying that today Cabinet did approve a solar plant, 42.5 megawatts, that will come with battery backed. Right. That is the other challenge that we're having with renewable energy, especially solar and wind storage, because of the volatility.
Okay.
So this one is going to come with storage. And guess what is the price?
Right.
3.83 US cents, the lowest.
Right.
Actually, EPRA does anticipate that we are going to have more solar plants at 5.75, but I'm looking straight in the eyes of Kenyans telling them Kengen is delivering 3.83.
Right.
What does that do? It is going to gradually reduce the cost of power. Why? Because if you bring more cheap power moving forward, it will help us average the country's power by cost of power, by reducing, by pulling down the country's average. Because we do have some expensive PPAs.
Exactly.
And the only thing that we can do to them is bring on board more power, but at a cheaper price, so that you pull down the average price. So we, as a ministry, are focusing on two areas. Transmission network, improving it, and I did elaborate the few lines that we are trying to clear. In fact, we do have more. Like now between Sultan Hamud and Loitoktok, by December we are commissioning. Kenya-Tanzania, to allow Kenya to trade power with Tanzania. Tanzania to buy power all the way from Ethiopia through Kenya to Tanzania. We are completing that section by December. We are completing a section between Isinya and Namanga, 132 kV, again by December. We do have Isinya Konza power line that is coming up that we should complete by April. So we do have many more. We want to push more power to coast. I did mention that coast is a serious load center, and coast is served straight from Kiambere. There's a 220 kV line to Rabai, and we are almost by April next year we should complete Mariakani substation. That will allow us to push power from all carrier to coast through a 400 kV line. What will that do to the country? It will, because once you push power at a higher voltage, you lower what we call the transmission losses. So for us to lower our power bills, we have to reduce the transmission losses that are incurred in our power bills. So one of the ways is to push power at a very high frequency. So if we are able to push from Susua all the way to Mariakani at 400 kV, we reduce the transmission losses. Again, we have a 310 megawatt plant in Lake Turkana. We are currently pushing power from Lake Turkana to Susua at 220. We anticipate that in the next couple of months, we should be able to push that power again at 400 kV and therefore reduce the transmission losses. We are working on having Kimuka substation. That will help us. Kimuka is just below Gong Hills. The other area that suffers some voltage instability is areas south of Nairobi. Kiserian, Rungai, Karen, Ngong, Kikuyu. They have voltage instabilities. Why? Because power to those areas, you can imagine Suswa where it is closer to Ngong than it is to Dandora. So power moves through the line we call Nairobi North, all the way to Dandora. Then from Dandora we do transmission lines going back to Ngong. going back to Kikuyu, going back to Kiserian. So what are we doing? We are intersecting the line between Suswa and Isinya. We create a T so that it enters Kimuka. We create a substation and we power these areas through 66 kV lines, about 6 feeders from Kimuka, so that you power Kikuyu, you power Karen, you power Rongai, you power Kiserian, you power Ngong, you power those areas I did mention Kawangware, those areas. So you want to power through that area. So what will happen is evacuate more power from the geothermals, have it distributed around there, reduce the transmission losses, and that way now, that is one of the ways that is going to affect, to help us reduce the power bills, because we lower the transmission costs.
Bwana PS.
Yes.
Of course, you have mentioned that a lot of independent power producers are currently, the rates are differing, and this is a matter of question to a lot of Kenyans. You had said that, of course, there are reforms that are being pushed within the ministry and within the State Department to standardize this. How then can you promise Kenyans to reduce, the power prices? It has risen by 70% in the last year. How will it be reduced with all these changes that you have just mentioned?
Well, it didn't increase by 70%.
Right.
Remember that there was a waiver that was of 15% that was done last year. Now that waiver of the 15%, we were paying for it as taxpayers.
Right.
Why? Because if KPLC is buying electricity at a lower, at a higher price, and selling this power to us as Kenyans at a lower price, somebody has to take care of this difference.
Right.
Either KPLC records the loss and foots it, or because of this waiver that we have given, we get from the taxpayer to cover this deficit. And that was also on the petroleum products. So what happened is the system could not hold. You can imagine this is a system, the tax that we are collecting is the one that you're using to pay civil servant salaries, to do development, to fund infrastructure, to also repay loans, and on top of that you add this way. So it was unsustainable. And that is at a time when this tax collection is shrinking. So we had a choice of either increasing the tax or removing this waiver, and that is what we did remove. So we just moved from we moved away from the 15%, and also now costed what Kenya Power needs to cost. That is one, the cost of generation, the cost of transmission, the cost of distribution, and a little headroom to allow for these transmission losses that I'm talking about. So how are we going to reduce the power costs?
Yes.
I did mention one way, and we are hoping we can be able to move the transmission losses from 22.4% to an envisaged about 17% in the next 3-4 years. So if we can be able to reduce those transmission losses, then they will directly translate into your power bill. That is one. Two, I did mention that with the improved hydrology, the improved levels of our dams, then we are doing more of hydropower production as opposed to doing thermal production. We have increased our renewable energy composition from 92% to around 96%. So currently we are only generating about 4% from our thermal plants. And during the low hydrology, we were pushing between 8 and 10%. That will affect your power bill of this month. When are you going to pay your power bill of this month? Next year in January. So I can tell Kenyans to look, I can look them in the eye and tell you that your power bill in the coming month will be slightly lower because of the impact of us generating more power using hydropower as opposed to thermal production.
And that's a promise.
Yes.
And that's a promise to Kenyans who are watching right now that
yes.
by next month,
yes, there'll be a small, there'll be a reduction.
Right.
I do not want, EPRA is still doing the numbers.
Of course.
I cannot promise an exact number, but certainly we expect that there'll be a reduction of the power costs.
Right, and that,
yes.
you know, you had it here first at TV 47 News, of course. By next month, your electricity prices might be going down by, you know, a couple of shillings, maybe more. Let's not push it. Let's be glad. We are going for a very short break, but when we come back, we have more. Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back.
Ni aje watu wangu, karibuni kwenye studio zetu za Mebet, na leo tuna furaha kuwaeleza kwamba tuna mshindi wa bonus ya MB8 ambaye alipata mechi 7 kwa 8. Wacha tuweze kuzungumza naye.
Naitwa Peterson Macharia, nimetoka Naivasha, kijiji naitwa Kamere na kule ndio mimi naishi.
Unafanya kazi gani kule Kamere?
Pale mimi ni bodaboda, licha ya kwamba mimi mzee lakini mimi mchapa bodaboda.
Ulijuaje kuhusu Mebet?
Kijana wangu aliweza kunielezea, lakini sasa sikuweza kumpuuza.
Sasa nataka nikukabidhi ile check yako ya bonus yako ya Kenya shillings 50,000 ili uweze kujihisi kama mshindi.
Atashukuru kabisa mimi.
Sasa hii ndio check yako ya 50,000 bonus ya MB8 ya zile mechi 7 kwa 8.
Nimeshukuru kabisa, na yenyewe na hizi kushinda juu nimejaribu kuingi pesa nimekuliwa, mpaka unapata marafiki wanakuambia wewe ni pesa unapoteza bure.
Mwekezaji, pia wewe waweza kuwa mshindi. Unachohitaji kufanya ni ingia kwenye tovuti yetu mebet.com uweze kuregister, ama tuma neno join kwenye 29098.
Parents, get your kids to Elfworld Kids Festival this Saturday 16th and Sunday 17th.
Welcome back to the marketplace. The topic tonight is energy. What exactly caused the blackout? How exactly are we faring on as a country? And what exactly does this mean for your pocket eventually? Geothermal remains the most significant source with an estimated potential of around 10,000 megawatts. But it remains relatively unexploited with a current installed capacity of less than 863 megawatts. Of course, Bwana PS, you have said that there are, ways in which this can be improved. If you could just tell us, looking into the future, we're going more sustainable, we're going more green. What are some of the power sources that we're looking at? You had mentioned nuclear power. Where are we as a country?
Let me first give the correct figure for geothermal.
Right.
We are currently at 985 megawatts.
An improvement.
Of geothermal, yes.
Fantastic.
We did commission in October Sosi and Menengai that is giving us 35 megawatts.
Right.
We are en route on having the second power source from Menengai,
right.
That is Globelec. By 2025, hopefully by September, they'll give us another 35 megawatts. And the last plant in Menengai, to total 105 megawatts,
right.
will be all power. that will give us in 2026 another 35 megawatts.
Right.
We are currently drilling through GDC, Paka and Silali. Paka is in north of Lake Baringo.
Right.
That's around Pokot, and we currently have steam of about 70 megawatts available. Actually, 75 megawatts available. We are hoping by April next year, we should be able to get about 100 megawatts, and therefore now start plans to construct 100 megawatts of a power plant in Paka, and that will be done, come to the grid by 2027. So we are doing more in terms of geothermal. We also have plans to do the High Grand Falls Dam. The High Grand Falls Dam will give us about 500 megawatts in the first phase. We are hoping to do through a PPP framework, and we should be able to start construction hopefully by 2025, 2026, should we get financial closure, and bring the power plant to the grid by 2031. High Grand Falls Dam is a very critical dam for us as Kenyans. You will realize that during the recent rains, there was flooding in Garissa, Bura.
Yes.
Yet our dams in the hydros were not full. Now remember, we talk of the Seven Forks dams.
Yes.
We still have 2 more dams that we have not done. One is called Karura. It will give us about 105 megawatts. But the game changer, one that will give us the spinning, increase our spinning reserve, increase our hydropower, and control flooding, is the High Grand Falls Dam. Why am I saying so? These rivers that were causing flooding in Garissa, and it is blamed on Kengen that it is Kengen that has released the water, which is not the case.
Right.
Most rivers in the county of the Rakanidi, Meru, the ones that come from Nyambene Hills, and a small part of Embu County, are not dammed in the 5 dams that I have mentioned: Kamburu, Kiambere, Gitaro, and Kindaruma. They are not dammed, and Masinga. They are not dammed. So what do? Even when they have excess water, the water just comes straight to Tana River and goes down, causes a havoc in...
Breaks the banks.
Yes. So High Grand Falls Dam is going to be the biggest dam in Kenya. It is going to hold a lot of water, and we are doing it through PPP, and we'll inject 500 megawatts. It will help us in controlling flooding, generating power, and lastly, we use it for irrigation. So those are some of the plans that I can mention that we are planning to have in place. Of course, we do have Kengen solar and Kengen wind. We have other solar plants that will be coming up in Isiolo, for example. Here we have 2 main wind corridors. One wind corridor is the one that passes through Kipeto. We still have more power plants that we can bring on board. We have a smaller wind corridor around Rimuru, and we have another wind corridor in the north around Turkana, and we have not fully exploited that potential. So we are looking into exploiting those potential. GDC has recently gotten a partner who can be able to finance GDC's operation in Suswa, and so therefore continue drilling geothermal potential in Suswa. So, and we did concession a few blocks to private individuals, hoping that they can also help this country accelerate generation of power through geothermal. And because we are talking of country interconnectors, by December 31st we'll be connected to Tanzania. We can push power to Tanzania all the way to Zambia. Once Tanzania completes the Tanzania-Zambia route interconnector, we are already connected with Ethiopia. We are already connected again with Uganda. So once we generate more power, we can be able to salvage our neighbors and vice versa through power trade. And that improves the regional integration. And of course, more stability. And if you look at Europe, for example, Europe is mainly interconnected. If Italy today, for example, has a plant that is out, it will instantly pick power from France or Austria North. If Germany has an issue, to pick power from Poland or Belgium or her neighbors. So that is the kind of interconnector that we're talking, to have the East African power pool, first of all, functional, then the larger African power pool, and enhance power trade. So there are huge opportunities that we do have. But of course, you cannot be born and run at the same time.
Right.
So we are. I don't want to say that we are crawling, but we are walking. We are not yet running.
Right.
But we are walking. We are not crawling.
Right.
We are walking. So now it's just increasing the pace, and eventually we run.
And progress, of course, is
Yes.
always a good thing. And expanding into the East African community, expanding into the wider, African market, we're that much closer to achieving Africa Continental Free Trade Area, agreements. Infrastructure is one of the ways in which we can get this. Now, with the potential expansion plans, of course, there was the promise of adding 1 million new customers to the grid each year, so we can sustain ourselves before we move into the East African community. What is the progress so far when it comes to last mile connectivity within the country?
We are doing well so far.
Right.
And I have to admit that we did have a challenge, and those are some of the things that we have done as the Kenya Kwanza administration.
Right. It's called the TP problems.
Yes. The whole of last year, that is 2022,
right,
there was no single meter, electricity meter, that was imported in this country.
Right.
As at today, we have tried to clear that backlog. Kenyans were crying left, right, and center and being conned. You apply for electricity, a connection is done, but you're not metered. We still have a backlog of probably about 120,000 meters, but we are going to unclog that and push the connectivity. We have 3 main programs that are coming up in the new year.
Right.
One, we have Last Mile Phase 4. That is funded by GOK, AFDB, and World Bank. We do have JICA, that will cover about 26 counties. We do have JICA that is funding last mile to the tune of 1.8 billion shillings in 4 counties, that is Kwale, Kilifi, Nyandarua, and Nakuru, which are counties that have have least connections. So we are trying to do an affirmative action on those counties. Then, of course, we do have the GOK funded last mile, which will also come in the new year. So in terms of reaching the 100% connectivity by the year 2030, I can tell you that we are on course and we are going to get there. The other thing that we are doing as a State Department is we are tasked with what we call clean cooking initiatives. And we are distributing clean cooking stoves. We are doing biogas facilities for institutions, and also doing demonstration centers within villages for farmers to embrace biogas. So there are a lot that we are doing, and we hope to have clean cooking by the year 2028. Why are we talking about clean cooking? One, cooking by firewood has shown that 23% of the pulmonary diseases emanate from, especially affecting children and women, emanate from the kitchen, especially those because of inhaling carbon dioxide because of wood fuel. That is number one. Number two is to preserve our forests. Because so long as we are using wood fuel to cook, and cooking is essential, then we have to continuously cut down the trees. And we are talking about reaching the 50 billion tree forest cover by the year 2030, in the next 10 years, 2032. We cannot achieve that if we are still cutting down our trees. So as a State Department, we are involved in afforestation. We are involved in helping cover our forest cover, and also reducing cutting of firewood by clean cooking initiative, and urging Kenyans to embrace e-cooking.
Yes. Cooking. Yeah. And of course, pushing the green agenda is very important.
Yes.
Kenya is known nowadays for being, the championing country for, climate change and climate action. Of course, you had mentioned something about, power meters. There was the whole debacle, the push and pull between, the courts and Kenya Power. And there's a question coming in right now. Someone is asking, what's Kenya Power's mandate? Is it to distribute or generate or retail power, especially with the new Energy Act? Bwana PS.
Kenya's electricity sector is quite unbundled.
Right.
Before 1994, Kenya Power used to do everything.
Right.
It used to be the generator, the transmitter, and the distributor, the off-taker. Right now, we have segmented the energy sector into three main components. Number one is generation, and we do have KenGen, GDC, and the IPPs doing the generation. And when you do have nuclear power, it will come in as the fourth generator for nuclear power. Then once you generate power, you transmit it. And that is why we do have KETRACO coming in as the main country's transmitter and evacuator of electricity to its load centers. Then now you have the last component, the off-taking and the distribution. So the country's off-taker, and that is why all those PPAs are banked by KPLC. In as much as we want to talk ill of KPLC, let us always remember that the person who has banked our PPAs, who has put their neck on the line, is KPLC. So KPLC is an off-taker and is a distributor. We do have REREC doing the same thing, but the role of REREC is doing rural electrification and renewable energy. So they push power to off-grid areas, to areas that have least power connection. So, and we fund it through GOK. Once REREC does that, it hands over the line to KPLC. So the role of KPLC is mainly to distribute the power and to maintain the distribution network. That is the main role. And of course, I did say that it's the mother of all, because it collects the money, then pays everybody else, pays the transmitter and pays the generator. Yes.
And that brings us back to the aspect of power producers, independent power producers. Again, there was the debacle on, the rates at which they're bought. They're quite, it's fluctuating. Some are very high, some are very low. There was talks on standardizing the rate so that, of course, it would be easier for Kenya Power not to get losses when they distribute power. What is the progress so far on that?
Hibak, let me tell you.
Yes.
This country around 2006, 2008 needed to bring on board more renewable energy. And so what happened is the country formulated what we call a feed-in tariff. The feed-in tariff was meant to bring more solar energy and more wind energy. And that is when we signed the PPAs of Lake Turkana, Kipeto, the solar plants around Eldoret and so what have you. Now, the country had to give, remember the country was also fighting because it had expensive diesel generators. And so therefore it was trying to make it attractive for every investor to invest in renewable energy so that the country could retire the expensive generators. So we ended up giving a kind of a good tariff to these renewable energies. Then secondly, we had to give a tariff that we call take or pay. Take or pay is that when the IPP has power, KPLC does not have a choice. It will either pick or it will pay. So it is cheaper for you to pick the expensive power than fail to pick it and still pay. So what are we doing as a sector? We have to learn from our lessons. And the lessons that we have seen are that we need to put certain benchmarks on certain generators. For for example, have a price, maximum price for wind energy that can come to the grid, have a maximum price for solar plants that can come to the grid. And that is how we are working towards bringing on board. And that is why I did mention that now I can tell you that we have signed 3.83 USNs for solar in Kamburu. We are looking to sign more. Of course, it is hard to get 3.83 from the other IPPs, but EPRA is looking at 5.75 as a price. Because for us to industrialize as a country, we have to generate more power, have more stable power, and have it at a good price for the investors to come and invest, and so therefore absorb our young people who are graduating year in, year out. And the young people require jobs. So the fastest way is ensuring that we have a stable grid, which is what, as a ministry, we are working towards.
Right.
Yes.
So for the progress of standardizing these prices, you're saying that we as a country are getting closer and closer to having, you know, kind of a stable rate?
I would say so.
Right.
Yes, I would say so, that that's what we are looking at.
Right.
And we are allowing competition to come in.
Right.
Yeah, because we have...
Competitiveness is very healthy for any market.
Because we have very many investors who wants to invest in renewable energy. Every week, I do not lack 3 to 4 investors who want to come and put up solar plants. Who want to come up and put wind plants. So the more the merrier. We are saying the more the merrier. Let them come, let them compete. And whoever gives us the best price, we give to Kenyans.
Right. May the best man win.
Exactly.
Of course, and there is the promise of, you know, power becoming cheaper. You know, competition also ensures that there's affordability, which a lot of Kenyans, I'm sure, are really interested in. Now, Kenya Power is to transfer some of the transmission assets it owns to KETRACO to clear parts of its foreign currency denominated loans and cushion against foreign issues. Now, how far is that process?
We did have a CAB memo that allowed for the transfer of the assets that are held by KPLC in their own books that are transmission assets to be transferred to KETRACO. Why are we saying so? Because KPLC owes a huge amount to government. So we are saying for us to offset this loan, instead of KPLC paying the loan, we transfer the assets and then we net off that amount, the value of those assets that KPLC has transferred to KETRACO, and we reduce the loan obligation of KPLC. That will help KPLC come back to profitability. The other thing that we are doing to KPLC, the loan book for KPLC, the larger quantum is in foreign denominated currencies. We are trying to refinance the same through Kenya shilling denominated currency, and so therefore reduce the loss, the exposure, because what has been happening is for every devaluation of Kenya shilling, so does it affect directly Kenya Power. And it has to pay more for the same loan it was paying when Kenya shilling was 120, or when Kenya shilling was 108 when it picked the loan. So to now prevent it from bleeding, further bleeding, we want to probably change a good quantum of the money of the loan to from foreign denominated to Kenya shilling denominated. So those are some of the things that we are trying to help KPLC clear. Now, when shall we effect the transfer of assets? Currently, it's a valuation that is going on. Once the valuation is done, we already have a committee that is looking into the transfer of assets. Then we have AG clear the transfer and National Treasury such that we shall say KPLC has agreed that the valuation of these assets, and KETRACO have agreed that once they move, this amount of money is going to be removed. So we are, I would say, we are halfway.
Right.
We are halfway there. Maybe probably we need another couple of months, but certainly not a year, just a couple of months. Yeah.
And one of the costs that are usually transferred to the customer eventually are transmission losses that we get when you're transmitting electricity from one point to another, which are at around 4.5%. You had said that there are plans to reduce this even further so that it doesn't go to the end user. If you could just maybe clarify on that a little bit.
Yeah, I did say the system, transmission and commercial losses combined,
right,
we are at around 22%.
Right.
This, the allowable figure worldwide
right.
is in the range of around 15%. So we have about 7% that we need to work on.
Right.
And some of the things that we can do to work on this, to reduce this, is pushing power through high voltage. And I did, for example, mention a few lines. I did mention Suswa to Isinya. I did mention Lake Turkana to Suswa, powering them through from 220 to 400 kV. Reducing the load that does transmit from Suswa to Nairobi North.
Right.
And by commissioning Kimuka substation, you remove the load that is being transported through Nairobi, which is a longer route,
right.
and you push it through a shorter route. Opening up Narok Bomet is another good way of reducing the transmission and system losses. Commissioning the Rumuruti substation by powering Nanyuki Rumuruti and completing the Nanyuki Isiolo, that's another route. Eventually doing the Kabarnet, Lesos Kabarnet, and that one we are hoping by around May next year, Lesos Kabarnet we should be able to complete. Right. And so therefore push power around Kabarnet region. And eventually we'll do also a line from Kabarnet to Rumuruti to complete the circuit, because for you to get power, hydropower, to Kabarnet, for example, you have to use a very long route. But right. Once we complete Nanyuki Isiolo, and remember Nanyuki is connected to Kamburu.
Right.
So Kamburu is a hydropower. So we move power from Kamburu to Nanyuki, Nanyuki to Rumuruti. Right. Rumuruti you can move to Kabarnet and vice versa. So once we move and complete these links that I'm talking about, Rabai, Kilifi, Bamburi, Rabai, Bamburi, Kilifi, we are doing it at 220. It is currently at 132 kV. So there are several other transmission lines that we must be able to do. We also want to do a line from Mariakani to Dongokundu, so that we make Dongokundu, the special economic zone, to be functional. We have Japanese investors who wants to do green hydrogen in Dongokundu. So there are several initiatives that we are putting in place that will do reduce the system and transmission losses.
Right.
And of course, smart metering.
Right.
Because when we do smart metering, then we reduce incidences where your bill has not been read. Right. It has been an estimate. We give you actual bills. And we also reduce electricity theft. Right. So those are the initiatives that we are putting in place to reduce. And once we reduce from 22 to around 15, it will definitely affect your bill, and you will see a reduction in your power bill.
Right, and accountability is very important. Going the smart meter way is always important, especially for Kenyans who are looking into ensuring that every single shilling you pay is, quite literally. And speaking of that, there's a lot coming in from X, that is Twitter, on load shedding, and that is our final question of the night. Speaking to Kenyans right now who are looking, who are watching TV47, what would you say? Tomorrow is, Thursday. Would there be a load shedding schedule? Should people start buying power banks?
I want to tell you, Kenyans, we do not have a problem of power generation. We have adequate power in the grid, more so because we have improved hydrologies in our dams. The issue is around a small region, the region between in the South Rift and in South Nyanza. That is the area that may experience some slight load shedding in very few hours in the evening, not during the day, in the evening peak hours. Right. Why am I talking about peak hours? Because when the industries are running, we have gone home, we have put up the lights, the street lights are on, then our power demand increases, and that is mainly between 6:30 and 9:30 p.m. heading towards 10. So and we are monitoring the situation. Right. And it will vary day per day depending on the load that is there on a particular day and what the line between Kisumu to Muhoroni to Chemosit can be able to carry. So the rest of the country, you have no reason to worry.
Right.
That is the only area that we are working to fast track what I talked about in Narok Bomet. We are hoping that we can have, we did get a cabinet approval. We should sign the loan with the FDP, hopefully by Tuesday. Thereafter, Ketraco will advertise to have a contractor. We have said once we bring on the contractor on board, there are certain stringent rules that we shall give so that we shorten the construction period from 16 months to possibly within a year.
Right.
So we are aware of the situation as it is. I did mention that we are also trying to unlock the stall line between Sondu, Homa Bay to Awendo. And once we clear that section, we shall deload and push more power to the South Nyanza region,
right.
and therefore not rely on this Kisumu Muhoroni route.
Right.
And that will mean more stability of power around that area.
Right.
But the ultimate game changer will be the construction of Narok Bomet, which we are anticipating should all things fall in place as we have planned. And we have very clear instructions from the president that we must fast track this. And that is, today I've chaired 3 meetings in regard to that.
Right.
We have NLC that is going to gazette the landowners for way leaves very soon. We have National Treasury fast tracking, AG fast tracking, so that we sign the loan by Tuesday. We advertise, get a contractor, get to the ground. So Kenyans, don't be worried. We don't have load shedding.
Right.
We have